All right, we'll get started here.
As far as safety rating goes.
7.11 unconventional oil and gas. But this second, look, I want to finish it up. You guys are talking about some of the new technologies and some of the little tiny cars. And I mean, it's absolutely possible to get a car that gets 100 miles per gallon, right? If it's a one-seater or a two-seater and it makes, I don't know, maybe 15 horsepower at tops, and there's no room to haul groceries or anything else, you think anybody would have an issue with a car like that? They want to park their Escalade so they can drive that little tiny vehicle?
Just driving it back and forth from work or something. Maybe.
Right.
Vacation.
Yeah, and what it comes down to, I mean, you look at the smart cars, even those haven't taken off, and that's actually kind of, I'm not going to say it's a real car, but it's closer to what we recognize as a real car, and even that hasn't taken off. But once again, it's because, what's that?
How much are smart cars?
I don't know.
Are they 15 grand, something like that? They're not crazy expensive, but for what they are. I see a lot of like people pulling behind motorhomes and stuff.
Right.
That way, when they get to where they're camping or whatever, they have a commuter vehicle to go like do stuff without driving that around.
I can see in a big city, and you know what, when I lived near San Francisco a few years ago, there were a lot of smart cars there because they're easy to park, they're easy to maneuver around. You know, you don't
It depends on your lifestyle. You're just commuting. You're not hauling anything.
And everybody's going 30 miles an hour. There's a big difference between 30 miles an hour and me, getting people in another equally small car and driving on a road in Montana at 75 miles an hour when there's a one-ton diesel truck coming in the other direction. You're probably not going to come out on the better end of that deal. So,
12.5 for base model.
okay. Yeah, so under 13 grand for a smart car. But even then, and that's cheap for a car of any kind. And you still don't see them selling. So that tells me that maybe economically it makes sense, maybe environmentally it makes sense, but as a society we're not ready for it.
I was looking at prices for fuel-efficient family vehicles, like family 4 or 5. You get a Dodge Caravan minivan, it's 18 miles to the gallon. The new technology coming out for any vehicle that can haul 6 to 7 people that gets over 40 miles per gallon is no less than $50,000.
Yeah. Yeah, the technology is going to cost you. If you want fuel economy, you're going to pay for it and still be able to haul. For the soccer mom, she either needs that Escalade to be able to haul those kids, or she needs, I guess Escalades cost 50 grand, so I don't know.
Even the base model Suburban has.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're crazy expensive. So, right now it's more of a society issue than it is the technology. We have technology to do it. People don't want to do it. They don't want to pay for it. Number one. And number two, that if they don't want to pay for it and they want to have the status quo same prices they're paying now, they won't take the trade-off in the vehicle that they're going to get instead of what they're driving. So, kind of
They
where we're
are
at.
making improvements between gas engines and like these constant velocity transmissions now.
Mhm. Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
I mean, my wife's got milk and it's 40 miles to the gallon of it. Generally, a little less in town.
Yeah, I just bought this 2015 Kia Optima, and it's 200 horsepower and a 4-cylinder. Performance-wise, you would not know that you didn't have at least a V6, if not more. I think outperforms cars that I had in the 80s that were considered performance cars. This thing would blow their doors off. And yet, it gets, out on the freeway, it'll get 37 to 40 miles per gallon all day long. And it'll comfortably seat 5. And probably if it didn't have every single, little accessory known to man, and I'm sure it's sat in that electrical system, it'd probably do even better than that. So, or if it weren't so heavy because of all that extra, junk that they had on it. So the technology is absolutely there. It's just a matter of what are we willing to pay. So let's talk a little bit about unconventional oil and gas. So we already talked about that a little bit with fracking. Todd brought that up of that's pretty new technology, right? And what's our reasoning for fracking? Why would we do fracking? What causes us to go after oil that requires so many extra steps and
To get the last little bit out.
to get the last little bit out? Absolutely. Or, I mean, we're talking about shale oil here, right? The problem is crude oil, the stuff that's easy to get at, you stick a pipe down into this huge underground lake of oil. You stick it down to the bottom, and it's just like a drinking straw. You just slurp the oil out. If you found the lowest point in the hole in that underground lake, you'll get, every bit of that oil out, or the vast majority of it. The problem with shale oil is instead of being a lake, you're digging into like a gravel bed, kind of, or a rock bed with all these different layers and there are little cracks in between there, and the oil is all through that rock. So what we need to do is get it to that central location. So what they'll do is sink their pipe down, seal around it, so they've got a sealed tube, pressurized, pump in there whatever fluids they use for fracking. It's mostly water, but there's some other chemicals that they use as well to help loosen up the oil and get it free of the rock. Under extremely high pressure, pushes the oil out of the rock into a central point where now they can collect it and pump it out, just like the underground lake. So the technology is purely to get it out of the rock. After that, it's just like any other oil well, once they pressurize it. And it's funny, and you talk about shale oil, which is what they're fracking. It's called kerogen. It's a waxy solid, found on page 259. The kerogen is in between the sheets of rock and the shale. And by pumping the water and those other chemicals, they free that up. So it's not necessarily waxing anymore. It actually, can move it to a liquid state. What are the big, and I guess we're talking about oil and tar sands is very similar in that there's a lot of effort going into getting this oil. What happened when the oil prices dropped below $60, $50 a barrel here a couple of months ago? What's it been, I guess? Probably been 8 months ago now. That was when the bottom kind of dropped out of the oil price per barrel. Production drops. Because of the extra costs associated with fracking, anything below $50 a barrel, it's not profitable for them to do anymore. So when oil dropped to $20 a barrel, if I've got traditional oil well in my backyard, say I live in Texas or Oklahoma or somewhere, and it just pumps out pure crude oil, it doesn't really cost me anything to run that, right? The costs are very minimal. So $20 a barrel, yeah, okay, I'll still sell it. I like it when it's $100 a barrel, but I'll settle for $20 a barrel. Fracking, I've got a cost of putting in all these other components in order to get that oil out. So I'm way over my return on investment, bare minimum $50 a barrel. So they had all kinds of wells over there that they said, okay, we're done pumping. Just cap them off. We'll come back later when the price goes back up. Because of that glut. Oil's still there. They didn't quit because there was no oil. It's not economic to do it. We talk about the tar sands, and that's a huge hot topic right now, right? What's our big issue with tar sands oil? Why are people so upset about us harvesting that oil?
You just have to go in and tear up the surface of the earth to get to it.
It's kind of messy environmentally. As far as extracting it, yeah, they got to go tear up these areas in northern Alberta. What kind of quality of oil are they getting out of there? Tar sand oil compared to, say, what's coming off of the North Slope.
Low, dirty.
Yeah, very low, very dirty. Kind of like we talked about the different kinds of coal and the different qualities of coal. That would be your 10 megajoules per kilogram version of oil. It's just, yeah, it's oil, and yes, we can do some stuff with it, but it's not worth the stuff we're getting out of it is not near as good. The quality of the oil is just not near as good. And again, we're talking about fracking to get that out. And what I think is really interesting, and I don't know much about, but I'd kind of like to research a little bit more. Box 713, bottom of page 262, underground pyrolysis. Started experimenting of, hey, what happens if we do underground coal gasification? You know, what are end results? What are our byproducts? We know if it's underground, it's pretty easy to do pyrolysis because you can't get any oxygen, right? So all we need to do is tap the gas coming off of that somehow, and we can utilize that. Same way they're talking about Shell's kind of playing with that in Colorado, which is heating their shale oil. We talked about the shale oil being keratin and very low quality. All it happens is if I superheat it for a couple of years, well, it speeds up that process of maturing to turn into a regular crude oil. So if my shale oil is very low value because I can't really do anything with it, but I can heat it for a couple of years and I've doubled the value of the oil, hey, maybe that's worthwhile to do.
You're just making it more efficient.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, it's all these technologies all play a role in this. That's why we're seeing such wide swinging numbers in both directions of, no, we have more oil. That it was oil 20 years ago we could not get, but today we can. And we're going to assume that there's places where we know there's oil in the ground, but it's not accessible today, but maybe in 20 years it will be. That's why that peak oil is such a moving target. So we look at, are they the answer to peak oil? All these new technologies. I think we're putting off the date a little bit, maybe.
Still inevitable you're going to use it.
Yeah, it's still inevitable it's going to go away, right? That it's a one-time deal, and there's no way we can make it as fast as we're using it. They're only, so altogether, they're only 11% of the current world's oil production. So fracking, tar sands, all these other sources are only a very 11%. So like I said, it might delay it by a couple of years, but that's about all it's doing, other than giving us some new technologies. So I'll let you guys read up on some of the other stuff that we've looked at. They have, what's that?
Hubert has been out there, too.
Yeah, the crazy hair dude down there. And I think it's funny, and I think it's something to keep in mind. In all these things, turns out that we don't know as much as we like to think that we do. That in his time with the data that he had at that day, he can make a prediction and say, what did we figure out that peak oil was? People agreed that peak oil was when? Do you remember?
1971.
1971. that was the peak. That was absolutely the most we would ever have, and they're on a downhill slide ever since. Well, that number keeps shifting because we keep finding more and more. And I'm not saying that we don't need to look, but I think we need to keep in mind what those numbers are and that they are always shifting based on technology. I think there are a lot of things that we have in this world that they get funding based on the fear factor. And if somebody said, okay, that's it, we're going to run out of oil, in 2020, you can bet we'd be putting all kinds of money into figuring out how can we find more oil. And it's really no different with a lot of other things that you see.
Whether it's a renewable energy business at all. Because
Yeah, I mean, it's good for us. The renewable energy business has taken off because of that threat of peak oil. But at the same time, it's probably not, we've already found it to be, inaccurate. Not saying it's not going to happen, but we can't really put our finger on it. But it's an opportunity for us. It's great that they started that fear, that scare, because that gives us jobs now to look at ways to better manage it, whether it's better managing oil or better managing the rest of our energy.
I think climate change is part of that too, part of the equation.
part of the fear.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I got a huge argument with one of my professors over that climate change is a business. Don't ever kid yourself otherwise, that it's not a business. And we got into that argument. The world as a whole in 2013 spent $383 billion on climate change study. If that's not a business, I don't know what is. I mean, that's half of the defense budget. That's a huge. That's larger than the GNP of probably the bottom 75%. Only other than maybe there's probably like 10 companies that have a gross national product larger than what we spend on climate change. So something to definitely keep in mind that it is a business, and there are absolutely people getting wealthy off of it. Enough on that rant. And it kind of talks about our reserves and how that number is always changing. There, page 267, figure 734, on page 269, talks about what we have out there. Our current fields, obviously, in the dark blue there, they're going down from here. That's the stuff that we know about. We're already tapping into, so obviously we're using it up. So it only makes sense that, by 2035, most of that's going to be gone. We have our crude fields that we haven't touched yet. Those are going to kind of make up the balance a little bit. We have our crude fields that are yet to be found, which we're doing all the time. It's kind of funny, the natural gas, though, you look at that, it goes up, and it's just been kind of staying steady. You don't see that decreasing like the other ones do. Any ideas on that?
Finding more of it.
Yeah, a lot of us just finding more of it. I mean, we're finding it in the ice, for God's sake. I mean, if you can't, and if you went and talked to a bunch of geologists and said, hey, where's the number one place to look for natural gas? They would not say ice. So that's probably why that one is there. And then we have our unconventional oils that are probably going to start playing a bigger part in things as we go. And I kind of like this. I kind of look at page 270. Are we at peak supply or are we at peak demand? Well, if you think about it, we've got what happened in 2009 when the economy kind of tanked and fuel went up to $4.50 a gallon in a lot of places.
Fuel mileage cars.
everybody got cars that got better fuel mileage. That helped a lot. What else did they do?
Imported fuels.
They stayed home. They just quit traveling, right? It's like, you know what? Hey, let's go to Billings for lunch today. You know, in 2008, that may seem like a great idea when you were paying, you know, $2.25 a gallon for gasoline. And all of a sudden you're paying $4.50 and the price is effectively doubled. It's like, okay, now I'm going to spend more on fuel than I'm going to spend on my actual lunch, so maybe I won't drive to Billings for lunch.
And they put tax on the amount of fuel you could buy, because people are hoarding them.
Did they see that?
I don't know about here, but in the East Coast, they were putting tax on 15 gallons or 20 gallons, 10 gallons, so all you can buy at a gas station at one time for one trip, because people were buying 300, 400 gallons.
Okay. The one time I've ever seen a cap on it like that, locally, we had that in, when I lived in Virginia and we got hit by Hurricane Isabel. The local gas stations were doing that because literally they were running out of gas and there was no immediate supply coming back in to refill them. So people were trying to run generators and stuff. So I think I've seen limits there. Typically what you see on these, the price is a limiting factor. Usually there's no...
They limit you by making sure you can't afford it.
Exactly. My thought of is there's a shortage, they're only going to let me have so much. If there's not a shortage, if I can go buy as much as I want, there's not a shortage. It's just a price manipulation. So, so maybe that was our peak demand, because now we're finding gas prices keep dropping and dropping and dropping, and people just are not traveling like they were. And it takes something like that a lot of times to change society's attitude. It might be, you know, you see a lot less big trucks driving around. Montana's kind of a weird for that, because you kind of need big trucks. You know, I mean, it's a fact of where we live and what we do. But if you go to a big city like San Francisco in say 2006, you know, everybody's driving around their Hummer H2s and their, you know, all these big V8, 8 mile per gallon, 10 mile per gallon.
The 8 Dodge Durango's were huge.
Yeah.
8 mile gallon.
But just by that price manipulation, people were like, "Whoa, can't afford to drive that anymore." And it changed society's standards. And now, if you go there, you'll still occasionally see that big vehicle, but not near as often. That was where it used to be that Escalade or Yukon or whatever was your status symbol. Now you go to San Francisco and a Prius is a status symbol. That they literally did a test on that, and they're trying to figure out why the other vehicles that are just as efficient, if not more efficient, than the Prius, why don't they have the same sales numbers? Well, it's literally,
a Prius has the good mileage.
people know what a Prius looks like. And even though I can get a hybrid SUV that gets the same exact gas mileage, literally, people in San Francisco would not buy it. They said, I will buy the Prius because I want my neighbors to be able to look down the street and see a Prius parked in my driveway. They know right away that I'm serious, I'm driving an electric car.
They're expensive too.
Yeah, they are. So it's like the new status symbol, just like the Yukon was or whatever, you know, vehicle they chose. So, you know, are we at peak supply, are we at peak demand? I don't know. Once again, it's a moving target. I'm not even going to try and guess at it. But we know that regardless of what any of this stuff is, there is an end in sight somewhere. So, in summary, there's 713. It's fairly new compared to coal. We haven't been using it that long, about 150 years, I guess, maybe 120 years of serious use where we actually know what we're doing. We talk about how similar they are, how similar coal is to oil. They're just in a different state, but chemically they're very, very similar. Look at how we find it. So they'll get refining. You guys ever had a chance to see a refinery or go through a refinery? If you ever get a chance, it's really, really cool. They had one, quick story, we only got a couple minutes. We were in Valdez, Alaska, shortly after 9/11, protecting the pipeline terminal. And part of that, I got a tour of the refinery because we were looking at any kind of infrastructure for what would be a terrorist target. Well, turns out on the road, the city, here, I want to draw a picture. You've ever been there? You come in, out here's Bly Reef where the Exxon Valdez ran aground. Come into the Port of Valdez, this is big, long harbor. The city of Valdez is right here. Kind of runs along this shoreline, and then this is the highway that goes out, and you can go over to Anchorage or wherever. The pipeline terminal is across the bay. You can see it, and if you take a boat over there, it takes like 5 minutes. It's 2 miles, maybe, over there. But you have to drive out of town, come all the way around, and the pipeline comes down the mountains here over Thompson Pass, comes in, runs alongside the bay, and there's all these huge storage tanks up here on the hill. Right here, right where the pipeline gets to the bottom of the hill, crosses the road, there's a little refinery there. And what they do is they have a pipeline that comes under the road, pumps oil in straight off the pipeline. They run it through their refinery process. The only thing they take out of that is diesel fuel. They heat it up, they refine it. You know, they got their tower, the refining tower where they crack it at a certain level, that's where the diesel fuel comes out. That's the only place it's tapped. Everything else gets put right back into the pipeline, goes down and goes on to the tankers. Well, when you're talking about, you know, how many millions of barrels a day go through that pipeline, the amount of diesel fuel that they're taking off is pretty inconsequential. So they're going to sell that. It's going to go to a refinery down in Richmond, California, who's also going to crack it to get their diesel fuel out. And they're going to be like, huh, we got like 10 gallons less diesel fuel out of that, you know, big tanker ship. You know, they don't really notice the difference, but these guys are taking off like 80,000 gallons a day of diesel fuel. And literally, they're providing all the diesel fuel and all the jet fuel for the state of Alaska, just from that refinery, just from tapping that out and then pumping it right back into the pipeline. So the end user doesn't even know the difference, but these guys are making a killing on it.
And it's probably make diesel fuel a lot cheaper up there than trying to
Oh yeah, absolutely.
ship it in.
Otherwise, you got to ship it
down here.
But it's so cool. You go in there and the thing is just, it's one guy sitting at a desk and there's just, you know, a row of computer monitors right there. He can see every single thing going on. He can push a button and open and close any valve. It's amazing. It's amazing.
But you said the pipeline's right there next to the road, so having the pipeline right next to the road, like that. You said you were looking for.
It kind of, but it's like, it would be the same as putting something at risk right out here in a farmer's field in Missoula. The locals know who's there and who belongs there and who shouldn't be there. And they pretty much fishy. Yeah, this thing is out in the middle of nowhere, and the odds of anybody A, finding it, B, getting to it logistically, they just can't get to it, the locals will be all over them.